Joining me live now to discuss today's top stories is Labor MP for Bennelong, Jerome Laxale, and Shadow Cabinet Secretary Andrew Wallace. Thank you so much for joining me, both of you. Just want to start now with Jerome. We've seen our opposition leader Susan Lee on the ground in Sydney today in Epping, used to be part of your electorate of Bennelong, now part of Barara. How do you think that's going to go? I mean, you've won back your seat, Jerome, by a significant margin, a large portion of Chinese Australians in that electorate. We didn't see Susan Lee pop into your office or anything?
No, well, my office is still there, Julia. She should have come in for a cup of tea. I'm sure we would have given her a tour. Well, the last Liberal leader, of course, to visit Epping was Scott Morrison. And looks like the vote from that part of the world has gone backwards since then. Look, the Liberals have a lot of work to do. And you just need to look at comments today by Barnaby Joyce on, the very normal thing for an Australian Prime Minister to do, to go and visit a Chinese leader. I just think they've got a lot of work to do. It's not just the Liberals, of course, it's the Nationals that need to do this. So I'm not surprised Susan has started in Epping, but they have a lot of soul-searching and a lot of work to do.
And I want to go to that, Andrew. So we've obviously got the Prime Minister making that trip to China later this week. A lot said about the fact that this comes before we've seen the Prime Minister lock in a date for a catch-up with Donald Trump 101. What does this say about our alliances?
Well, it really does go to show that the relationship between the Prime Minister and President Trump needs a lot of work. I'll accept Jerome's challenge. The Liberal Party have got a lot of work to do, but the Prime Minister certainly has a lot of work to do on his relationship with our principal strategic partner, being the United States, and its leader, the President. Look, whether the Prime Minister doesn't like President Trump personally or not, whether he has certain ideas of him, that's regardless. It doesn't matter. The point is, he is the Prime Minister of this country, and the United States is our most important strategic partner, and it's incumbent upon the Prime Minister to get that visit and work on the relationship. We've got a lot of important things that we need to address. The security of AUKUS, the AUKUS arrangement, our trade arrangements with the United States. These are things that the Prime Minister really should have dealt with already. We're now at about 244 days, I think, since the President was elected, and still it looks like no visit has been lined up. And that's something that the Prime Minister should do with haste.
Jerome, I want to get your thoughts on that too. Should we be reading anything into that? And also today we've seen China's ambassador to Australia, Xiao Qin, say China wants to expand its free trade agreement and expand that to include artificial intelligence, new technologies. We heard Susan Lee last hour say we should approach that with caution. Do you think this will be well received in your electorate of Bennelong? Is this the right approach?
Well, I think you've seen our approach to trade across the world being well received, not only by my electorate, but right across Australia. Of course, we've normalised trade relations with China, $20 billion worth of tariffs removed. We've restarted our negotiations on the EU trade agreement. But just back to Andrew's comments, and those, I guess, more broadly of the Liberal Party, it's a really dangerous line to take. It's clear that Australia and the US have a close relationship. The Prime Minister has spoken to President Trump 3 times. The Defence Minister has met with his counterpart. The Foreign Minister was there last week as part of the Quad and also had bilateral meetings. I mean, to try and spin this just for some domestic political gain is pretty wild, to be honest, and that you'd think that the Liberal Party and the Nationals would have learnt something from the last 2 elections. We'll continue to take our approach with our international partners seriously, a calm and consistent approach, as you've seen, not only with China, but with other partners as well.
Is there anything in the fact that we're not seeing that one-on-one locked in? Do you think the PM's team are wanting to do a catch-up more on the sidelines of an upcoming summit rather than that White House sit-down? I mean, a lot of the messaging from Anthony Albanese at the last election was that Dutton is a Trump-like figure. Is he trying to avoid that?
No, look, I don't think so. I think the Prime Minister's made it clear he's happy to meet with President Trump. As I said, he's spoken to him 3 times on the phone already. One of them was a received call congratulating Prime Minister Albanese on his win. I think, stable and normal relationships are ones that we'll continue to have, be it with the US, be it with China, be it with the EU. This is how our government approached foreign affairs at the last term, and will continue to do so.
Andrew,
It's a good spin. It's a good spin, Jerome. The reality is that the vast bulk of Australians know that there's something crook here between the relationship between President Trump and the Prime Minister. Australians instinctively know that. You've only got to read the newspapers to see the level of commentary now that is calling into question the personal relationship between the Prime Minister and the President. And this is no doubt, in my view, caused at least in part because of the lack of defence spending. We're still at 2% of GDP when our NATO partners and friends are now committing to 5% of GDP. But the Prime Minister is very, very clearly, we saw it again on the weekend with his speech in relation to John Curtin, that the Prime Minister is trying to differentiate himself here from the United States. He's trying to almost have like a repeat of what Australia did in World War II, separating from Great Britain and pivoting towards the United States. He's almost saying, well, look, we can stand on our own 2 feet. Now, that would be fine, maybe, if the Prime Minister was prepared to spend money on defence so that we actually could look after ourselves. But the 2% of GDP that is being spent right now is absolutely inadequate. We saw that in the Defence Strategic Review that he himself instigated. We need to be at a minimum of 3% of GDP. All of the defence experts agree, but the Prime Minister seems to think he knows better.
Andrew, just while I've still got you and while we've got Jerome in the studio, and speaking of people like John Howard, long-time member of Bennelong, he's been really outspoken about not supporting the introduction of gender quotas in the Liberal Party alongside other heavyweights like Tony Abbott. What's your view?
Well, I had a really good conversation with David Crucifulli just last week. I'm a big believer that success leaves clues. And David Crucifulli went to the last Queensland state election not committing to quotas, and yet the 14 seats that they had to win, he got more than 7 of those to be filled by women.
You don't support them being introduced at the moment?
That was without quotas. Now,
I believe what you think they should follow now, not introducing that more.
I think we should be looking very, very closely at what the Queensland LNP did at the last state election. Success leaves clues. David Crucifulli went about this approach by personally engaging with women to run for pre-selection for particular seats. That's something that I think that we should be replicating at a national level. I'm a big believer in meritocracy. And I think, quite frankly, quotas are demeaning to women. Women should know that they want a seat because they are the best candidate on the field.
You've got
the best candidate available. The best person should win pre-selection.
I'll tell you what's
Quotas by their very nature are reducing 50% of the population of people who can stand for a particular seat.
Can I just put to you, Andrew, if you've got Susan Lee coming out at National Press Club and saying she backs state branches of the party to make up their own minds, is it then undermining of figures like Angus Taylor to come out and say, actually, no, I don't back that? What do you think of the difference in views there?
Well, I don't think there is a difference of views. And I think that this has been totally overblown, because I was sitting in that room and Susan Lee said, she's a zealot for getting more women into Parliament, as am I. I hold sessions and forums for women who are interested in getting into politics. But what Susan said is that ultimately pre-selection in the LNP or Liberal Party is up to the state jurisdictions themselves, up to the state parties. And she said, if a state wants to run with a quota, she's okay with that. If they don't want to run with a quota, she's okay with that. But what she won't stand for, and quite frankly, none of us should stand for, is where we have a situation where we have such low representation in the parliament of women. We've got to do better.
We're just running out of time, Andrew. It's certainly an interesting discussion as we see an internal war in the party over this. Jerome, your views?
Oh, I mean, where do I start with that? I mean, I can't believe I'm hearing this in 2025. I tell you what's demeaning to Liberal women, and that's having very low representation in the parliament over and over again. If you want to look at success in this, Andrew, I'll give you a hot tip. Look at what the Labor Party did 30 years ago now. That's introduced gender quotas to empower women within the Labor Party. At the last election, we had a caucus of 52% women. It's now gone up to 57%. We represent the communities that elect us, and that's exactly where the Liberal Party should look if they want some encouragement on how to fix what is a fundamental problem for you guys. So there's a hot tip
Thanks for the
me.
advice, Jerome.
Always a fiery topic. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming on.